You invited me here. You actually thought you could parade your new life in front of me, and I wouldn't fight back. David, you've mistaken my silence for defeat. It was just preparation." The air crackled with a tension thicker than the humid summer day. This wasn't a baby shower, it was an ambush. David thought he held all the cards, but he hadn't accounted for the woman scorned, nor the stunning secret she carried. A secret that, when revealed, would obliterate his smug world and ignite the most unbelievable karma this town had ever witnessed. Get ready, because the gloves are off. The heavy linen paper felt like sandpaper against Sarah's fingertips, an ironically rough texture for such a smooth act of malice. It was cream-colored, embossed with tiny, smiling cherubs, and smelled faintly of lavender and new money arrogance. You are joyfully invited to celebrate the upcoming arrival of baby Thompson. Sarah's former name, Sarah Thompson. Now, just Sarah Wells. A name she had slowly, painstakingly rebuilt over 3 years of therapy, late nights, and the suffocating silence of an apartment that felt too large for one. She gripped the invitation tighter, the thin card threatening to crease under the pressure of suppressed rage. David Thompson, her ex-husband. The man who had spent 5 years of their marriage whispering about the defect in their union, blaming her body, her stress, her career for the failure to conceive. The man who had walked out, declaring with brutal finality that he deserved a future he could father, leaving Sarah hollowed out by grief, self-doubt, and the cold realization that her inability to conceive had been the convenient escape route he craved. Their divorce had been fast and surgical, lacking any messy sentimentality. David had moved on with the efficiency of a predator, finding Lisa within 6 months, a woman 10 years his junior, blonde, bubbly, and, crucially, fertile. Lisa, the living, breathing proof that David's narrative had been correct. He was ready, she was the obstacle. But the invitation wasn't just a general announcement, it was a personal missive, delivered via courier, sealed with a condescending handwritten note from David himself. "Dear Sarah," the note read, David's familiar, precise script, a cruel mirror of the promises he'd once made. "Lisa and I thought you might want to see how truly happy I am. No hard feelings, of course. Just wanted you to witness the fulfillment of a dream I waited so long for. You always said I wouldn't give up. RSVP by Friday." It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons to her own public execution. He wanted her to show up, a barren relic from his past, to quietly sip punch and observe the fecund, glorious future he had secured without her. He wanted to rub salt in the deepest, most vulnerable wound she possessed, the yearning for motherhood he had exploited. A deep, visceral wave of cold clarity washed over Sarah. For 3 years, she had let David control the narrative. She had allowed their friends and family to believe the divorce was a mutual decision born of irreconcilable differences, primarily centered around their shared, agonizing inability to start a family. David had played the martyr well, the good man who had tried everything, loved his wife dearly, but simply couldn't give up his biological destiny. Now he was attempting to weaponize that destiny. Sarah walked over to the oversized window overlooking the bustling city park. The light caught the silver frames on her desk. One held a picture of a newly planted oak tree she'd sponsored for a local conservation effort, her quiet way of nurturing something. The other, however, held a much newer, much more transformative image. 2 small, gap-toothed grins, one framed by a tangle of honey-colored curls, the other by short, dark spikes. Leo and Luna. They weren't hers in the biological sense that David valued, but they were hers in every other way that mattered. In the quiet, determined years after the divorce, Sarah had done the necessary, exhausting work. She had healed, gone back to school, launched a successful consultancy, and, most importantly, confronted her deepest fear. She realized she didn't need David's genes. She just needed a family. 6 months ago, through an incredibly complex, stressful, and ultimately miraculous international fostering-to-adopt program, Leo and Luna, fraternal twins from a small orphanage in Eastern Europe, had arrived. They were 3 years old, fire and ice bundled into two tiny, demanding bodies. They were chaos, love, exhaustion, and salvation. They were her life. The decision to attend David's baby shower was made the moment her eyes met the defiant, challenging look of the invitations script. This was no longer about revenge. It was about rewriting the narrative for good. It was about showing David that his cruelty was irrelevant, that his perceived superiority was a sham, and that the happiness he was trying to parade was built on a lie she had long since superseded. She picked up her phone and dialed her best friend, Maya, who was a high-powered defense attorney with a flair for the dramatic. "Maya," Sarah said, her voice steady, low, and laced with an edge Maya instantly recognized as dangerous. "I need your help picking out an outfit. And I need a stroller, no, a double stroller, that screams, 'I didn't try to conceive for 5 years. I simply waited for the upgrade.'" Maya laughed, a sharp, knowing sound. "Oh, Sarah, you finally decided to stop letting him win the PR war. What's the venue? I assume we need something that contrasts beautifully with pastels and disappointment." "The Thompson Estate Gardens, over the top, naturally." Sarah glanced at the invitation again. "And David thinks he's inviting me to see his happiness. I think I'll invite myself to witness his undoing." The confrontation wouldn't be simple. David was a master manipulator. He would have planted seeds of pity among his guests, casting Sarah as the lonely, bitter ex. Sarah needed more than just the twins. She needed a truth bomb, a twist so devastating it would make David's perfect white picket fence crumble into ash. She knew one thing David didn't know, the true medical reason for their infertility. 5 years into their marriage, after countless agonizing tests, David had demanded they halt all invasive procedures, claiming he couldn't stand seeing Sarah suffer anymore. A noble gesture, perhaps, but Sarah knew the truth. Just before he called it off, one critical, highly sensitive result had come back, a result David had immediately suppressed and demanded she forget. The truth was, Sarah had suffered from secondary, not primary infertility. And David's contribution to the issue was not zero. The tests had indicated an extreme, nearly untreatable issue on his side that rendered the success rate statistically negligible, regardless of Sarah's condition. The divorce allowed him to bury that truth and project all the failure onto her. Sarah's plan coalesced. She would arrive late with maximum impact, displaying her immediate, robust motherhood. She would let David make his inevitable, humiliating comment. And then she would deliver the payload. Not just that she was a mother, but that his entire identity as the virile, baby-craving victim was a lie, and that the child he was celebrating was a trophy he had no real claim to, biologically or morally. She crumbled the cherub-embossed invitation and tossed it into the recycling bin. This was no longer a party. It was a courtroom, and she was about to deliver the closing statement. Life after David had been a descent into darkness before a hard, necessary climb toward daylight. Sarah hadn't just gotten divorced. She had dismantled her entire self-concept. The woman David had defined as broken and unfulfilled had spent the first year mourning the future that never was. The second year was dedicated to therapy and work, creating an impregnable professional shield. The third year was when the quiet miracle of Leo and Luna began to unfold. It wasn't easy. The decision to pursue adoption, and later international fostering to adopt, was entirely hers. A path David had always dismissed as second best. He craved the biological extension of himself. Sarah, finally free from his narcissistic demands, simply craved a child. The process to bring Leo and Luna home had been bureaucratic purgatory. Endless paperwork, home studies, background checks that scrutinized her life down to her high school transcripts, and a waiting period that stretched her patience to the breaking point. The call finally came on a rainy Tuesday morning. Twins, fraternal, 3 years old, in dire need of a permanent, loving home. Their names were Leonidas and Luna. Sarah immediately shortened them to Leo and Luna. The first few months were a delightful nightmare. Leo was the quiet observer, the thoughtful mischief maker with a protective streak. Luna was pure energy, a whirlwind of spontaneous singing and sudden, passionate declarations of love. They spoke minimal English, and Sarah, who hadn't studied Romanian in college, was communicating through equal parts frantic translation apps and sheer, desperate love. Now, 6 months in, they were a family. The twins knew her voice, demanded her presence, and their small hands found hers instinctively. They were proof that David's narrative of her failure was entirely false. She hadn't been destined for barrenness. She had been destined for them. "Okay, Sarah, break down the logistics for me one more time," Maya said, striding into Sarah's apartment a week before the shower, 2 enormous garment bags slung over her shoulder. Maya was all business, even when planning social warfare. "We arrived precisely 30 minutes after the scheduled start," Sarah explained, pouring 2 glasses of sparkling water. "The venue is the Thompson Gardens, which means open air, plenty of witnesses and no easy exits. I need to make a visual statement that requires immediate acknowledgement." "Visual statement, understood," Maya nodded, pulling out a stunning emerald green cocktail dress. The color was vibrant, confident, and screamed success. "David always said pastels were appropriate for you. This is a deliberate, unapologetic contrast. Perfect. Now the twins." "The twins are the cavalry," Maya stated, setting down a pair of pristine Italian-designed double strollers, one black, sleek and minimalist, the other a playful cream color. "We're taking the black one. It says, 'I'm chic, wealthy, and have my life together, even with 2 toddlers.' They are going to be dressed in matching bespoke sailor outfits. We're leaning into the adorable, yet somehow intimidating aesthetic." Sarah chuckled, a genuine, joyful sound that hadn't been possible 3 years ago. "Intimidating toddlers. I like it." "The goal is simple, Sarah. David wants to humiliate you. We are turning his humiliation into his martyrdom. You are not the childless ex. You are the immediate, successful mother of 2. He looks like a jealous, petty fool who dumped his amazing wife only for her to upgrade her family size by 100% in half the time." "And the bombshell?" Sarah asked, her voice dropping. Maya's expression turned serious. "That's the nuclear option. We only use it if he pushes too hard, if he tries to explicitly diminish the twins or your motherhood. Are you ready for the fallout? It doesn't just damage David. It will expose his deep-seated insecurities to everyone he cares about." "He exposed mine for 5 years," Sarah said, her eyes darkening. "He made me feel like damaged goods, not just to him, but to myself." The test results, the severe oligozoospermia. He knew the chances of us having a biological child were practically zero, regardless of my history. He let me take the blame, pay for the therapy, and endure the judgment of his family. "And he made you sign that divorce settlement where you took less because you were too distraught to fight," Maya added, reviewing the legal notes she had brought. "The documents you kept? They are certified lab reports, undeniable. They will prove David is infertile, a fact Lisa probably doesn't even know." Sarah felt a cold resolve settle over her. He thinks he's celebrating his virility and my failure. I want him to understand completely and utterly that he failed me, and in doing so, he failed himself. The weeks leading up to the shower were a blend of meticulous planning and joyful, chaotic parenting. Sarah practiced her neutral, detached expression in the mirror. She worked out, not for vanity, but for strength. She spent hours researching David's new social circle, understanding the psychology of the guests, the old money country club set, the shallow colleagues, and the few remaining mutual friends who had awkwardly sided with David. Lisa, the new wife, was the wild card. Sarah knew Lisa was performing motherhood with the zeal of a new convert. Lisa's social media was a relentless stream of bump photos, nursery decor, and artisanal baby clothes, a stark contrast to Sarah's own quiet, protective approach to motherhood. Lisa was likely David's willing co-conspirator in the humiliation. On the day before the shower, Sarah took Leo and Luna to the park. The twins chased pigeons, giggling wildly, their hands sticky with melting ice cream. Watching them, Sarah felt a rush of peace. It didn't matter what David thought or what anyone at the shower believed. These children were the truth. They were her victory. "Mummy, up!" Luna commanded, holding up her arms, a universal plea. Sarah scooped her up, then pulled Leo into a hug with her other arm. Two toddlers, 3 years old, heavy with life and love. She didn't have one baby. She had two demanding, undeniable little humans. "Tomorrow, my little ones," Sarah whispered into Luna's hair, "we go to a party. We are going to be very brave, and we are going to show everyone what a real family looks like." She looked forward to the confrontation, not with bitterness, but with a fierce, protective certainty. David had invited a victim. He was about to meet a warrior. The Thompson estate was a monument to David's ambition, a sprawling property he had acquired shortly after the divorce. The gardens, usually reserved for charity galas, were decked out in a dizzying array of blue and white ribbons. A massive tent housed catered stations, an ice sculpture of a stork, and a towering cake that probably cost more than Sarah's first car. Everything screamed excess, a deliberate and loud assertion of David's new, blessed life. Inside the tent, David, immaculate in a crisp linen suit, moved through the crowd with the forced bonhomie of a man who believed himself truly superior. His hand frequently rested on Lisa's heavily pregnant belly. Lisa, radiant and slightly exhausted, wore a flowing white dress that emphasized her maternal status, her blonde hair carefully curled. They were the perfect portrait of fulfilled destiny. "Did you send the confirmation to Sarah?" Lisa whispered to David, clutching a flute of sparkling cider. David's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, she RSVP'd accepted. She wouldn't miss this for the world. She needs the closure, Lisa. It's important for her to see that I've found happiness." He patted her hand, but his eyes were scanning the entrance, anticipating Sarah's solitary, somber arrival. He pictured her in a subdued grey dress, nursing a glass of punch, a palpable aura of regret hanging over her. It was the moment he had rehearsed in his mind 100 times. The quiet acknowledgement of his success, the final undeniable proof that he had been right to leave. Meanwhile, in the luxury SUV parked 2 blocks away, Sarah was performing last-minute checks. Leo and Luna were stunning in their miniature navy sailor suits, their patent leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. "Luna, remember what we talked about?" Sarah crouched down, meeting the little girl's intense blue gaze. "Quiet hands when we meet the new people. And when Mommy tells you to say hello, you say, 'Hello, everyone,' okay?" Luna, who rarely did anything on command, simply nodded, absorbed in making car sounds. Leo, ever the negotiator, piped up, "Ice cream after?" "3 scoops, Leo. If you're both perfect gentleman and gentlewoman," Sarah promised. She checked her reflection. The emerald dress was a triumph. It was tailored to perfection, cinched at the waist, radiating confidence and power, the uniform of a woman who had fought a war and won before the first shot was fired. She looked nothing like the fragile, stressed-out woman David had left. The clock read 3:30 p.m., exactly 30 minutes late. "Time for our grand entrance," Sarah murmured. The drive from the street to the entrance of the Thompson Gardens was long and winding. As the SUV pulled up, David was in the middle of a toast. his voice ringing out across the crowd. "And I thank God every day for this miracle, and for Lisa, who gave me the future I was always meant to have." He paused dramatically, his eyes sweeping the guests, ensuring everyone felt the weight of his profound, hard-won joy, the joy Sarah couldn't provide. It was precisely at this moment the engine of Sarah's SUV roared, and a uniformed driver smoothly opened the back hatch. The noise drew all eyes. Heads turned, murmurs rippled through the crowd. David, spotting the familiar figure stepping out in the shockingly bright green dress, faltered mid-sentence. His toast died in his throat. Sarah stepped out, a vision of composure and success. She was not somber, she was luminous. But the real shockwave hit when the driver, with practiced ease, pulled out the sleek black double stroller. It was massive, undeniably professional, and seated within it, perfectly coordinated and wide-eyed, were two small, 3-year-old human beings. The sound in the garden didn't just stop, it seemed to invert. The murmurs went silent, replaced by a collective, sustained gasp that was audible even meters away. David, still holding his champagne flute, stared, paralyzed. Lisa, standing next to him, squinted, then gaped. Sarah approached, navigating the stroller through the manicured lawn with the casual grace of a seasoned parent. She reached the edge of the central gathering where David and Lisa stood on a slightly elevated dais. "David! Lisa!" Sarah's voice was warm, carrying just enough volume to command attention without shouting. Her smile was genuine, but her eyes held a spark of pure, focused intensity. "I hope I'm not too late. Traffic was dreadful, and getting 2 3-year-olds ready for a party is, as you can imagine, quite the undertaking." She stopped the stroller and knelt slightly, adjusting the sailor hats on Leo and Luna. "Say hello to everyone, darlings." Leo, spotting the cake, immediately shouted, "Cake!" Luna, however, looked up at the hundreds of staring faces, tilted her head, and delivered the requested line with impeccable enunciation, her accent thick but adorable. "Hello, everyone!" The cuteness was lethal. The drama was immediate. People stopped observing and started reacting. Guests turned their whispers into pointed questions. "Twins? When did this happen? I thought she couldn't have children. 3 years old. Where have they been?" David finally found his voice, a high, thin sound utterly lacking his usual authority. "Sarah, what is this? A joke?" Lisa, regaining her composure faster, stepped forward, her hand still on her bump, trying to establish dominance. "Sarah, darling, it's lovely that you brought a prop. But we're here to celebrate my baby. Perhaps you could leave the children outside." The word prop was the trigger. It was the explicit, direct denigration Sarah had been waiting for, the line of cruelty that justified everything that followed. Sarah rose slowly, placing a protective hand on the back of the stroller. Her face remained composed, but her voice lost all lightness, becoming steel wrapped in silk. "They aren't props, Lisa. These are Leo and Luna. They are 3 years old, and they have been legally my children for 6 months. They are my family. They are the fulfillment of my dream." She looked directly at David, whose face was a study in pure, unadulterated shock, turning rapidly to fear. "And unlike you, David, I didn't have to wait 5 years or blame anyone to find them. I simply got my life together and completed my family." The soap opera had officially begun. The camera had panned wide on David's face, confirming his profound, public humiliation. His smugness had vanished, replaced by a dawning terror. The silence that followed Sarah's declaration was profound, broken only by the gentle whir of the double stroller's wheels as Luna began to lightly kick the bar in excitement. The entire party, around 150 guests, including David's stern-faced business partners and Lisa's overly supportive family, was locked in a collective freeze frame of astonishment. David was the first to move, though his actions were purely reactive, driven by panic. He descended the small dais, his linen suit suddenly looking cheap and ill-fitting. He approached Sarah, hissing under his breath, "You absolute nightmare! You think this is funny? Parading around with rented children? This is spite, Sarah. You've hit a new low." Sarah met his gaze unflinchingly. "Rented? David, you wouldn't know genuine love if it arrived on your doorstep with official adoption papers. I spent the last 3 years building a life you claimed I was incapable of having. Leo and Luna are mine. Ask my attorney Maya. She processed the final adoption decree last month." A few of the mutual friends, who had reluctantly attended the shower, exchanged confused, horrified glances. They knew Sarah. They knew her quiet dignity. If she was saying this, it was true. Lisa, however, was not giving up the spotlight. She waddled toward them, placing herself protectively between David and Sarah, emphasizing her maternity. "Look, David, just ignore her," Lisa said, her voice strained but aiming for patronizing pity. "It's clearly a desperate attempt to gain attention. It's sad, Sarah. It truly is. Trying to upstage a baby shower with substitutes. You should really talk to someone about this resentment." The insult "substitutes" hung in the air, heavy and offensive, immediately turning the crowd's sympathy away from Lisa. To dismiss 2 beautiful present children as mere replacements was a breathtaking display of cruelty. Sarah's demeanor shifted from cool detachment to controlled fury. She reached into the stroller and lifted Leo onto her hip, settling him comfortably against her chest. Leo, sensing the tension, wrapped his arms tightly around her neck. "Substitutes, Lisa," Sarah repeated, her voice perfectly modulated, a devastating theatrical whisper. "I have 2 beautiful, healthy children. You have a party, a dress, and a baby still in the oven. I think the only thing being substituted here is genuine happiness for a grotesque display of ego." Then, Sarah turned her attention back to David, raising her voice just enough for the surrounding guests to hear every word. "David invited me here today to humiliate me," Sarah announced, addressing the crowd now, performing for the room. "He wanted me to stand here, barren, alone, and witness the fulfillment of his so-called dream. He wanted to cement the narrative that our marriage failed because I couldn't give him a child." She let that sink in, the noise of the party equipment suddenly seeming deafening. "But here's a twist for your celebration, David. A fact you meticulously buried 3 years ago when you ran away." Sarah pulled a sealed envelope from the small, elegant clutch bag she carried. "After 5 years of grueling, painful and expensive tests I endured, tests I paid for, the final definitive results came back. The results you destroyed." David's face went white. The blood drained so completely that the veins on his temples stood out, throbbing visibly. He knew exactly what she held. "Stop, Sarah! Don't you dare!" David spat, lunging toward her, attempting to snatch the envelope. Maya, who had positioned herself perfectly at the edge of the crowd, stepped forward, blocking him with an almost imperceptible, practiced movement. "Careful, David," Maya warned, her voice professionally smooth. "Assaulting my client in front of dozens of witnesses would be highly inadvisable." Sarah ignored him, her focus locked on the crowd. She held up the envelope. "The truth is, David," Sarah continued, her voice clear and strong, "the medical specialists concluded with near certainty that the primary, statistically insurmountable barrier to our conception was not my stress, not my body, but severe male factor infertility on your part. The issue wasn't that I was defective. The issue was that you couldn't give me what you claimed to crave." The collective intake of breath from the guests was like a physical wave. The energy of the party instantly transformed into the electric charge of a public scandal. This was not gossip. This was a fundamental rewriting of David's carefully crafted identity. David, shattered, could only stammer, "Lies! Slander! She's lying! I'm fathering this child. Look at Lisa." Sarah looked at Lisa, who was now visibly trembling, her hand gripping David's arm, not in support, but in fear. Lisa's expression was no longer one of haughty pity. It was dawning, horrific comprehension. "Yes, David, look at Lisa," Sarah agreed, a cold finality entering her tone. "You and I both know you destroyed the evidence that proved your medical condition. The question, then, is not whether you can have a child. The question is, did you check to see if you were the father of this child, or did you simply rely on the fact that Lisa is fertile and I was your convenient scapegoat?" The implication was brutal, direct, and devastating. David had blamed his ex-wife for his failure, only for her to turn around, present her own family, and publicly question the paternity of his new child, based on a medical secret he thought was buried forever. The emotional fantasy was collapsing into a true American soap opera climax. The crowd was no longer a party. It was a hungry audience. Phones were subtly being raised, recording the silent, agonizing drama unfolding center stage. David's face, a roadmap of denial, horror, and incandescent rage, was captured from multiple angles. "You are fabricating this, Sarah," David choked out, trying to rally his support, though his voice cracked on the final word. "Lisa, tell her this is our child, proof that she's making it up." Lisa, trapped between the man she married and the scientific fact staring her in the face, stammered, "Of course it's his. We tried. We didn't need tests. It happened so fast." "It happened fast because Lisa is fertile, David," Sarah retorted, gently stroking Leo's back. "That much is clear, but your condition doesn't vanish simply because you found a woman who can get pregnant. It's genetic, and your medical prognosis was, and remains, extremely poor." Sarah turned to Lisa, her expression softening slightly, adopting a tone of professional concern mixed with pity. "Lisa, I understand you're excited, but ask David to show you any documentation of conception other than your ultrasound photos. Ask him why he refused to do even basic preventative checks, knowing his history. Was he afraid of confirming what he already knew?" The seed of doubt, planted firmly in Lisa's mind, began to bloom into panic. Lisa knew how quickly the pregnancy had happened, how she had joked it was just meant to be. She knew how violently David had shut down any conversation about fertility tracking, insisting, "We don't need that clinical stuff, we're doing it naturally." Now, the memory of a brief, ill-advised fling with a handsome acquaintance during a difficult patch in their engagement suddenly surged into her mind, icy cold and terrifying. Suddenly, a woman from David's side of the family, an older cousin named Eleanor, known for her sharp tongue and fidelity to David's mother, intervened. "This is outrageous, Sarah. You bring your adopted children here to spew baseless lies at a woman 7 months pregnant. Where is your decency? Get out." "Decency?" Sarah laughed, a short, humorless burst. "David's decency died the day he let me leave the marriage believing I was fundamentally flawed so he could escape the truth of his own body. He is not a victim of barrenness. He is a master of projection." It was at this exact chaotic moment, the climax of David's humiliation, that the first true, hard piece of cosmic karma hit, a twist so perfectly timed it felt scripted by the gods of drama. A sleek black sedan driven by a man in an expensive suit pulled up rapidly to the perimeter of the party, ignoring the valet. The man, broad-shouldered and radiating aggressive confidence, strode purposefully toward the commotion. He was recognized instantly by several of the guests as Marcus Vance, a high-profile real estate developer known for his ruthless business practices and, occasionally, his public affairs. Marcus Vance stopped short when he saw the chaos, specifically recognizing Lisa's distraught, tear-streaked face. "Lisa, what the hell is going on here?" Marcus demanded, pushing through a group of startled guests. David spun around, recognizing Marcus immediately, a man he hated, a rival developer, and someone Lisa had vaguely mentioned knowing from the gym. "Get out, Vance. This is a private event," David yelled, his rage finally overcoming his terror. Marcus ignored David, his focus locked on Lisa. "I saw your car parked down the street. I heard your husband called you in tears an hour ago. He said he was coming to confront you at your baby shower. I need to know why, Lisa. What did you tell him?" Lisa's face dissolved into pure, catastrophic horror. She hadn't been crying to David, she had been crying to him. The connection was instantly, violently clear. David, already reeling from the infertility reveal, realized that Marcus Vance was talking about a different confrontation. David stumbled back, staring at Marcus, then at the terror in Lisa's eyes. Who are you talking about, Lisa? Who were you crying to?" Marcus, completely oblivious to the context of the initial confrontation with Sarah, blurted out the fatal truth, trying to save Lisa from what he thought was her husband's anger. "About the baby, Lisa. I told you not to worry. I'm taking care of everything. Your husband won't find out. I'm the father, Lisa. It's my baby, not David's." The sound of David's champagne flute shattering on the cobblestone path was deafening in the face of the subsequent silence. The crowd collectively gasped again, but this time the gasp was laced with the exhilaration of true, raw scandal. Sarah's initial revelation about David's infertility had been devastating. Marcus Vance's arrival turned it into absolute, undeniable cinematic karma. David Thompson, the man who had ruined his ex-wife's life by blaming her for his own inability to procreate, was not only infertile, but had been cheated on. And the child he was celebrating, the very trophy he had invited Sarah to witness, was demonstrably another man's. Sarah watched the scene unfold with a detached sense of vindication. She didn't need to say another word. The universe, in the form of an ill-timed appearance by a side character, had delivered the final crushing blow for her. David Thompson's carefully constructed reality fractured instantly. His vision tunneled, the blue and white decorations swirling into a dizzying vortex around the face of Marcus Vance, his rival, his enemy, the confirmed father of the child he had been boasting about. "You," David whispered, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus, then swiveling toward Lisa, his face contorted in a mask of betrayal that somehow managed to look pathetic rather than tragic. "You lying, conniving little—" "Don't you dare!" Lisa shrieked, her earlier composure completely gone, replaced by hysteria. She looked like a cornered animal, clutching her massive belly. "You pushed me to this, David. For months, years, it was nothing but, 'We need a baby. We need my legacy.' You said I was so fertile. You called me your salvation, and yet you refused to go near a doctor. You were so obsessed with the idea of a natural miracle that you never once considered the possibility that the problem wasn't Sarah, and it wasn't me. It was you." Lisa collapsed onto a nearby garden bench, sobbing uncontrollably. The physical and emotional strain was too much. Her mother, previously silent and rigid, rushed forward, cradling Lisa and shooting furious protective glances at both David and Marcus. Marcus, finally realizing the full catastrophic extent of his blunder, attempted to backtrack, but it was too late. The words were out, recorded, witnessed. "Look, David, I didn't know about the party. This wasn't supposed to happen this way. We were going to tell you, eventually." "Eventually!" David roared, abandoning all pretense of decorum. He lunged at Marcus, driven by years of repressed professional jealousy now fused with agonizing personal betrayal. The men collided, a messy, undignified scuffle that sent a table of artisanal finger sandwiches flying. Guests, half horrified and half thrilled, scrambled to pull them apart. The sheer violence of the confrontation, a grown man fighting the father of his supposed child at his own baby shower, all while his ex-wife watched with 2 children of her own, was peak, unfiltered YouTube drama. David was finally restrained by 2 large security guards who had materialized out of the service entrance. He was breathing heavily, his suit stained with grass and punch, his reputation utterly decimated. He looked across the scene of his ruin, his eyes finally landing on Sarah. Sarah stood quietly by the stroller, a small, dignified distance away from the melee. Leo was asleep on her shoulder, and Luna was calmly petting the head of an ice sculpture stork, entirely oblivious to the human wreckage around her. Sarah was the epicenter of calm in a storm of David's own making. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" David yelled, his voice raw with fury and despair. "You planned this. You brought those toddlers here to set me up." Sarah finally spoke, her voice measured, cutting through the emotional noise like a laser. "No, David. I brought my children here to show you that my life moved on successfully. I brought the certified lab report to defend my dignity, which you tried to steal. The rest," she gestured toward Marcus, the crying Lisa, and the scattering guests. "The rest is the consequence of your own choices. You built your new life on a foundation of lies and blame. That foundation always crumbles." She gently set Leo back into the stroller and adjusted his blanket. "You didn't want a child, David," Sarah concluded, looking directly into his tortured eyes one last time. "You wanted a trophy. You wanted proof of your own virility, and you were willing to destroy me to get it. Karma isn't a single lightning bolt, David. It's the slow, meticulous collapse of everything you pretended to be." With a final, elegant pivot, Sarah pushed the black double stroller away from the center of the storm. Maya followed close behind, holding the now redundant lab report. "The 3-scoop ice cream deal is still on, Mommy?" Leo murmured sleepily from the stroller. "Absolutely, my love," Sarah replied, smiling down at her children. As Sarah and the twins exited the garden, the cacophony of the collapsing party swelled behind them. The security guards were dealing with David, who had dissolved into incoherent shouting. Lisa was being escorted away by her mother, weeping about her ruined life. Marcus Vance, still bewildered, was trying to explain himself to a rapidly dwindling circle of onlookers. The party, the symbol of David's victory, was over. It had ended not with a toast, but with a paternity reveal, a fistfight, and the undeniable exposure of a narcissist who had banked his entire future on a lie. Sarah didn't look back. She had closure, dignity, and 2 beautiful children. She had won the war without firing the final shot. David had done that to himself. The ripple effects of the Thompson baby shower meltdown were immediate and brutal. The event, which David had intended as a celebratory showcase, became an overnight viral sensation. Someone, likely a guest or perhaps one of the catering staff, had captured the crucial moments: David's reaction, Marcus Vance's shouting confession, and Lisa's horrified collapse, and uploaded them. The footage was blurry, the audio patchy, but the narrative was gold. Ego, infertility lies, and a shock paternity reveal at an $80,000 baby shower. David Thompson's carefully curated professional life began to unravel faster than the expensive silk ribbons decorating the garden. His business partners, recognizing the volatility and instability in the man who had just publicly imploded over a paternity scandal tied to an ex-wife he'd allegedly lied about, distanced themselves. Within 2 weeks, David was placed on indefinite leave from his executive position, effectively sidelining him. His reputation as a sharp, controlled businessman was replaced by the image of a raging, humiliated failure. The breakup with Lisa was equally catastrophic. The baby, undeniably Marcus Vance's, was not the symbol of David's virility. It was a permanent monument to his failure to accept the truth. Lisa, facing the reality of a public scandal and David's impotent rage, moved out of the Thompson estate within days. She later quietly settled with Marcus Vance, choosing stability and the acknowledged father over David's toxic narcissism. The dream house, the trophy wife, and the legacy baby vanished, leaving David alone in the echo of his own spectacular undoing. Meanwhile, Sarah and the twins retreated into a quiet, purposeful life. The public narrative had shifted entirely. Sarah was no longer the childless ex. She was the elegant, successful woman who had faced down her abuser with truth and quiet strength, a single mother who had achieved her dream of family through tenacity and love. The anonymous leak of the certified lab results to a small, local news blog, details of which Maya swore she knew nothing about, only cemented David's status as a liar who had weaponized a medical condition against his spouse. Sarah found herself unexpectedly contacted by several women who had experienced similar forms of blame and gaslighting in their own relationships. This led to her next great project, the Second Chance Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to supporting couples and single individuals pursuing non-traditional paths to parenthood, focusing particularly on navigating the psychological toll of infertility struggles and partner conflict. One afternoon, 6 months after the baby shower, Sarah sat in her sun-drenched living room. Leo and Luna were attempting to build a structurally unsound tower out of wooden blocks. "Look, Mummy, tall!" Leo proclaimed just before the tower collapsed into a satisfying crash. Sarah smiled, watching the genuine, unscripted joy of her children. The air was filled with the sense of warm milk and wood polish, a reality 1,000 times richer than the sterile perfection David had chased. A notification popped up on her tablet, an article reporting that the Thompson estate was officially listed for sale. David had over-leveraged his assets in a desperate attempt to maintain the image of success, and the financial and reputational fallout from the shower had finally caught up. He was not just financially ruined, he was emotionally isolated. He had been left with nothing but his pride and the knowledge that his carefully constructed lie had been his undoing. David Thompson's karma was complete. He had lost everything he valued: his status, his trophy wife, his legacy child, and his home, all because he had tried to weaponize another person's supposed weakness. Sarah realized the profound moral lesson in the entire saga. Her true victory wasn't the public humiliation of David. It was her refusal to let his narrative define her. She had been freed by his cruelty, allowing her to find a path to motherhood, a path David had deemed second best. That turned out to be the most genuine and fulfilling path of all. She had found 2 children who needed her love, and in return, they had healed her. She picked up Luna, who immediately snuggled into her neck. "I love you, Mommy," Luna whispered, her little voice full of the pure, simple truth David had never been capable of appreciating. "I love you too, my little firecracker," Sarah replied. She glanced out the window at the busy world outside. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. David was a memory, a cautionary tale, a footnote in the beautiful, chaotic life she had built. The noise and drama of the soap opera had passed, leaving behind a profound, lasting resonance. True happiness is never found in humiliating others, but in embracing your own authentic truth. This story isn't just about a baby shower. It's about the devastating price of vanity and the quiet, fierce dignity of a woman who chose love over revenge. David thought he was proving his success, but all he did was set the stage for his own collapse. Sarah walked away with what truly mattered: a healed heart and a family built on unconditional love. Ultimately, hard karma proves that the truth always finds its way out, and the most fulfilling life is one lived authentically, free from the need to humiliate others. If you were as shocked by that paternity twist as the guests were, smash that like button. Let me know in the comments below, what was David's biggest mistake? Share this video with someone who loves a dramatic revenge tale, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into a world where karma always delivers the final unforgettable chapter.